The doorbell camera caught Karen's smug face as she waved that fake cease and desist letter, demanding Mike get proper permission before removing his own pool from his own backyard. She had no idea the real twist was coming. 3 hours later, when the police knocked on her door with handcuffs ready, Karen's expression shifted from entitled neighbor to something much more desperate. The body cam footage would later go viral, but not for the reasons she expected. Sometimes karma doesn't just knock. Mike Harrison stood in his backyard, sweat dripping down his face as he surveyed the half-demolished above-ground pool that had become his weekend nemesis. The 24-foot monstrosity had been the previous owner's pride and joy, but to Mike, it was nothing more than a rust-stained eyesore that blocked his view of the garden. He'd been planning for months. The sledgehammer felt good in his hands. Therapeutic even. Each swing against the metal framework was a release of the frustration that had been building since he'd moved into the suburban neighborhood 6 months ago. The pool was on his property, well within his property lines, and he had every right to tear it down. Excuse me, the shrill voice cut through the morning air like a rusty knife. Mike paused mid-swing and turned toward the chain-link fence that separated his yard from his neighbor's. Karen Delmont stood there, her arms crossed and her face twisted into what he'd come to recognize as her signature expression of moral superiority. "What can I do for you, Karen?" Mike asked, setting the sledgehammer down and wiping his hands on his jeans. He'd learned early on that politeness was the best defense against Karen's daily complaints about everything from his garbage can placement to the color of his mailbox. Karen adjusted her oversized sunglasses and pointed an accusatory finger at the partially demolished pool. "You can't just tear that down without proper permits and approvals. This is a regulated neighborhood with strict guidelines about structural modifications." Mike felt his jaw tighten. "It's an above-ground pool, Karen, on my property. I'm not building anything. I'm removing something." "That's not how it works," Karen said, her voice rising with the confidence of someone who'd never been challenged on her made-up rules. "Any structural changes require approval from the homeowners association and the city planning department. You should have gotten permission before you started this. ... Destruction. Permission." Mike laughed, but there was no humor in it. Permission. To remove a pool from my own backyard. Karen's expression grew more severe. "Don't take that tone with me, young man. I've been living in this neighborhood for 15 years, and I know the rules. You're in violation of multiple ordinances, and if you don't stop immediately, I'll have no choice but to report you to the authorities." Mike picked up the sledgehammer again, feeling its weight in his hands. "You do what you think you need to. Do, Karen? I'm going to keep working on my property." "We'll see about that," Karen snapped, pulling out her phone. "I'm documenting this destruction for my report, and don't think I won't follow through. I have connections in the city planning office." As Karen began taking photos and videos, Mike continued his work. The metal framework groaned and buckled under each impact, and he found himself swinging harder than necessary. It wasn't just the pool he was demolishing, it was his growing frustration with Karen's constant interference in his life. 20 minutes later, as Mike was loading broken metal pieces into his truck, Karen reappeared at the fence. This time, she carried a manila envelope and wore an expression of smug satisfaction. "I warned you," she said, waving the envelope. "This is a cease and desist order. You are hereby ordered to stop all demolition activities immediately, pending a full review by the Homeowners Association and the City Planning Department." Mike wiped his hands on a rag and walked over to the fence. "Let me see that." Karen held the envelope just out of reach. "You can read it from there. The important part is that you need to stop what you're doing right now, or you'll face legal consequences." "Hand it over, Karen." "I don't think so. This is an official legal document, and I'm serving it to you according to proper protocol. Consider yourself officially notified." Mike reached through the fence and snatched the envelope before Karen could react. She let out a squonk of protest, but he was already tearing it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper with cease and desist typed at the top in large bold letters. The rest was a rambling paragraph about neighborhood regulations and property modifications printed on what appeared to be standard computer paper. "This isn't a legal document," Mike said, looking up at Karen. "This is something you typed up on your computer and printed at home." Karen's face flushed red. "It's perfectly valid. I researched the proper format online. Who issued this? What authority does it come from? The homeowners association. And the city. I'm acting as their representative. Mike crumpled the paper into a ball. Karen, you're not a representative of anyone. You're just a busybody neighbor who thinks she can control what other people do on their own property. How dare you? Karen's voice reached a pitch that made a nearby dog start barking. I'm trying to maintain property values and neighborhood standards while you're out here destroying everything like some kind of vandal. I'm removing a pool from my backyard. If that threatens your property values, maybe you should consider moving somewhere with stricter HOA regulations. Karen's eyes narrowed. You think you're so smart, don't you? Well, let me tell you something, Mike Harrison. I've dealt with troublemakers like you before, and I know exactly how to handle this situation. You have no idea who you're messing with. Enlighten me. I have connections. Real connections. Not just in the planning department, but in law enforcement too. My brother-in-law is a sergeant with the county sheriff's office, and he doesn't take kindly to people who think they can ignore legitimate legal orders. Mike felt a chill run down his spine, not from fear, but from anger. Are you threatening me, Karen? I'm informing you of the consequences of your actions. When you choose to break the law, there are people who will make sure you face justice. Breaking the law by removing a pool from my own property, breaking the law by ignoring a legal cease and desist order, and continuing with unpermitted construction activities. Mike stared at her for a long moment, then walked back to his truck and grabbed the sledgehammer. I'm going back to work now, Karen. Feel free to call whoever you want. Fine, Karen shouted, but don't say I didn't warn you when the police show up at your door. As Mike resumed his demolition work, he could hear Karen on the phone, her voice carrying across the yard in animated conversation. He caught fragments of her side of the conversation, immediate response, legal order, dangerous destruction, and felt his anger building with each exaggerated claim. 2 hours later, Mike was loading the last of the pool debris into his truck when he heard car doors slamming in his driveway. He walked around to the front of the house and saw 2 police officers approaching his front door. Mr. Harrison, the older officer, a stocky man with graying hair, stepped forward. I'm Officer Rodriguez, and this is Officer Chen. We received a complaint about unpermitted construction activities on your property. Mike set down his work gloves and nodded. Let me guess Karen Delmont called you. Officer Rodriguez consulted his notepad. A neighbor reported that you were ignoring a legal cease and desist order and continuing with unauthorized demolition work. I was removing an above-ground pool from my backyard, Mike said. It's my property, and I have every right to remove it. Can we see this cease and desist order? Mike walked over to where he'd thrown the crumpled paper and retrieved it. He smoothed it out and handed it to Officer Rodriguez, who examined it with a frown. This isn't an official legal document, the officer said after a moment. It appears to be something someone typed up at home. That's what I told Karen. Officer Chen spoke up. Did you check with your HOA before starting the work? There is no HOA. I checked before I bought the house specifically because I didn't want to deal with that kind of oversight. Officer Rodriguez made a note. And you said you were removing a pool, not building anything. Above-ground pool? It was already there when I bought the house, and I wanted it gone. I'm not building anything or making any permanent changes to the property. The 2 officers exchanged glances. Officer Rodriguez cleared his throat. Mr. Harrison, based on what? You've told us in what we can see, it doesn't appear that you violated any laws or ordinances. Removing a temporary structure like an above-ground pool from your own property is within your rights as a homeowner. Mike felt a wave of relief. Wash over him so I can continue with the work. As far as we can tell, yes. However, we do need to advise you that if there are any legitimate complaints about noise ordinances or safety concerns, those would need to be addressed. I understand. I've been working during normal daytime hours and taking all the proper safety precautions. Officer Chen nodded. That's all we can ask for. We'll document our findings in our report. As the officers turned to leave, Mike called after them. Officers, what happens when someone files a false police report, especially when they claim to have a legal document that they created themselves? Officer Rodriguez paused. That depends on... The next morning, Mike woke to the sound of his doorbell ringing insistently. He glanced at the clock. 6:47 a.m. through his bedroom window. He could see Karen pacing on his front porch, clutching what appeared to be another envelope. Mike pulled on a robe and opened the door, his phone already recording. After yesterday's events, he wasn't taking any chances. "We need to talk," Karen said, her voice lacking its usual imperious tone. She looked like she hadn't slept. Her hair was disheveled, her makeup smudged, and her hands were shaking slightly. "Good morning to you too, Karen. It's not even 7 a.m. This is serious, Mike. That conversation with the police yesterday. There were some misunderstandings that need to be cleared up." Mike leaned against his doorframe, noting how Karen's eyes kept darting to his phone. "What kind of misunderstandings?" "Look, maybe I came on a little strong yesterday with the whole cease and desist thing. Neighbors sometimes have disagreements, right? But we can work this out between ourselves. We don't need to involve law enforcement in every little dispute." "Every little dispute," Mike's voice rose. "Karen, you filed a false police report. You created a fake legal document and tried to intimidate me with it. Then you threatened me with your supposed connections in law enforcement." Karen's face went pale. "I never threatened you. I was just explaining the process, and that document wasn't fake. It was just unofficial. There's no such thing as an unofficial cease and desist order, Karen. You either have legal authority to issue one or you don't. And you don't? Okay, fine." Karen's composure finally cracked. "Maybe I overstepped a little. But you have to understand this. Neighborhood has standards, property values. When someone moves in and starts tearing things apart without consideration for how it affects everyone else. I was removing a pool from my backyard, Karen. How does that affect you? It affects the whole neighborhood. And the way you've been going about it, with all that noise and debris, it's been disruptive. All I wanted was for you to follow proper procedures." Mike stepped closer, and Karen instinctively backed up. "What proper procedures? You made them up. There is no HOA. There are no neighborhood approval requirements for removing a temporary structure from my own property. You invented rules that don't exist and then tried to enforce them with fake legal documents." "It wasn't fake," Karen's voice cracked. "I researched the format online. I followed the proper template." "Karen, listen to yourself. You're talking about downloading a template and pretending it has legal authority. That's not how the law works." Karen's hands were shaking more visibly now. "Look, maybe we both got a little heated yesterday. But we can put this behind us, right? Neighbors should be able to work things out without getting lawyers and police involved in every little disagreement. Yesterday, you were threatening to call your brother-in-law to have me arrested. Today, you want to work things out. What changed?" Karen's face flushed red. "Nothing changed. I think we should try to be more neighborly about this." Mike's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and felt his eyebrows raise. "Karen, is your brother-in-law really a sergeant with the county sheriff's office?" "Of course he is. Why would I lie about something like that?" Mike held up his phone. "Because Officer Rodriguez just texted me. Apparently, they ran your brother-in-law's name through their system. Want to guess what they found?" Karen's face went from red to white in seconds. What do you mean?" "They found David Dalemont. All right, 43 years old, married to your sister Susan, works as a night manager at a grocery store. No law enforcement background whatsoever. Never." Has been Karen's mouth opened and closed without any sound coming out. "So not only did you create fake legal documents and file a false police report, but you also lied about having connections in law enforcement. Do you understand how serious this is getting? David used to want to be a police officer. He took some criminal justice classes in community college. I may have exaggerated his current position. You lied, Karen. You deliberately misrepresented your brother-in-law's job to try to intimidate me." Karen suddenly straightened up, some of her old defiance returning. "Fine, so maybe I embellished a few details, but you can't prove I intended to deceive anyone. And you still tore down that pool without proper consideration for neighborhood impact." Mike stared at her in amazement. "You're still trying to make this about the pool? Property values in this neighborhood have been stable for years. When someone moves in and starts making changes without consulting the community, it affects everyone. Karen, there is no community consultation process. There is no neighborhood approval committee. There is no HOA. These are all things you made up in your head. Just because there isn't a formal organization doesn't mean neighbors shouldn't have input on major changes that affect them. It wasn't a major change. It was removing a temporary structure that was already falling apart. Karen's voice rose. Again, that pool has been part of this neighborhood's character for 8 years. The previous owners, the Johnsons, used to host pool parties that brought the whole community together. It was a gathering place, a focal point for neighborhood socializing. You've destroyed something that had real meaning to people, Mike rubbed. His temples, feeling a headache building. Karen, did you ever actually attend any of these pool parties? That's not the point. It's exactly the point. You're creating some fantasy about neighborhood, unity, and community spirit around a rusty above-ground pool that I'm guessing you complained about constantly when the Johnsons lived here. Karen's silence was telling. That's what I thought, Mike. Continued, you probably filed noise complaints about their pool parties, didn't you? The noise levels were excessive on weekends, and some of the guests parked inconsiderately. But that doesn't mean let me get this straight. When the Johnsons owned the pool, you complained about the noise and the parties. Now that I'm removing it, you're complaining about the loss of neighborhood character. Do you see how nothing I do is going to satisfy you? Karen's phone rang, and she glanced at it with obvious relief. I have to take this. Karen Delmont. This is Detective Sarah Morrison with the County Fraud Unit. We need to schedule a time to speak with you about some recent allegations regarding false documents and fraudulent claims to law enforcement. Mike could hear the detective's voice clearly through Karen's phone. Karen's face went ashen. I'm not sure what you're referring to, Karen stammered. Ma'am, we have video evidence of you presenting what you claimed was a legal cease and desist order, as well as recorded statements about your alleged connections in law enforcement. We need to discuss these matters with you as soon as possible. Karen's hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped the phone. Can I call you back? I'm in the middle of something right now. Ma'am, this isn't optional. We can either schedule a voluntary interview or we can pursue other avenues. Which would you prefer? I'll come in. When do you need me? This afternoon at 2 p.m., County Administration Building, 3rd floor. Ask for Detective Morrison. Karen hung up and stood frozen on Mike's porch, staring at her phone. Karen, Mike said gently, are you okay? She looked up at him with tears in her eyes. This is all your fault. All I wanted was for you to be a considerate neighbor. I never meant for things to get so complicated. You created fake legal documents and lied to police officers. Karen, those aren't the actions of someone who just wanted to be a good neighbor. I was trying to protect the neighborhood. Someone has to maintain standards by lying and intimidating people. Karen's composure finally shattered completely. You don't understand what it's like. I've lived here for 15 years, watching this place change, watching new people move in who don't care about the community we've built. The Johnsons understood. They respected the neighborhood traditions. What traditions, Karen? Asking permission to modify your own property? Following made-up rules that you invented. It's about respect. It's about considering how your actions affect other people. Then why didn't you just come over and talk to me like a normal person instead of creating fake legal documents? Karen wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Because people like you don't listen unless you make them listen. I've tried being nice with new neighbors before, and they just ignore everything I say, people like me. People who think they can just move into an established neighborhood and change whatever they want without considering anyone else. Mike felt his anger rising again. Karen, I removed a pool from my backyard. I didn't tear down anyone else's property. I didn't violate any actual laws or regulations. I didn't even make excessive noise or create a safety hazard. What exactly was the problem? The problem is that you didn't ask. You didn't consider the impact on property values or neighborhood aesthetics or community sentiment. You just decided what you wanted and did it. Because it's my property and I have that right. Rights aren't the only thing that matters in a community. Mike took a deep breath. Karen, you're right that communities require consideration and cooperation. But what you did wasn't community building, it was attempted control through deception and intimidation. There's a difference. Karen stared at him for a long moment, then turned and walked away without another word. Mike watched. Mike woke at 3:17 a.m. to the sound of his security system's motion detector chiming. He grabbed his phone and opened the camera app. Cycling through the feeds from the doorbell camera and the 2 security cameras he'd installed after yesterday's Conversation with Detective Morrison. The backyard camera showed a figure in dark clothing moving along the fence line between his property and Karen's. The person appeared to be carrying something, a bag or container of some kind. Mike watched as the figure crouched down near the spot where his pool had been, then moved toward his house. Mike's heart rate spiked as he realized the figure was approaching his back door. He quickly dialed 911 while keeping his eyes on the camera feed. 911, what's your emergency? This is Mike Harrison at 247 Elm Street. Someone is trespassing on my property. They're at my back door right now. Are you? In immediate danger, sir. I don't know. I'm inside the house, but they're right outside. I have security camera footage of them moving around my backyard. Officers are on their way. Stay on the line with me and don't leave the house. Mike watched through the camera as the figure tried the handle of his back door, then moved to his kitchen window. In the dim light from his motion-activated floodlight, he could see the person's face for the first time. It was Karen. I can see who it is, Mike told the 911 operator. It's my neighbor, Karen Delmont. She's the one the police have been looking for. There's a warrant out for her arrest. The officers are 2 minutes away. Can you see what she's doing? Mike watched as Karen knelt down near his back door and began pulling items out of the bag she'd been carrying. She placed something on the ground, then stood up and moved back toward the fence. She put something by my back door, and now she's heading back toward her property. Don't approach whatever she left there. Wait for the officers. Mike heard sirens. In the distance, growing louder. On the camera feed, he saw Karen freeze, then break into a run toward the back corner of his yard, where the properties met a small wooded area. She's running toward the woods behind the houses, Mike reported. 2 police cars arrived simultaneously, their headlights sweeping across the front yards. Mike met Officer Rodriguez at his front door, phone still in hand. She went around back, Mike said. There's something she left by my back door. Show us, Rodriguez said, motioning for Mike to lead the way. They walked around to the backyard, where the motion lights had activated, flooding the area with bright white light. Near Mike's back door, Karen had arranged what appeared to be a small pile of white powder and several small plastic bags. Nobody touch anything, Rodriguez said, calling for backup on his radio. We need a crime scene unit here. Mike stared at the items in disbelief. She's trying to frame me. That's what it looks like, Rodriguez agreed. Good thing you have those security cameras. 20 minutes later, Mike's backyard was swarming with police officers, crime scene technicians, and Detective Morrison. The powder had been photographed, collected, and bagged as evidence. Baking soda, Detective Morrison announced, holding up one of the evidence bags. She scattered baking soda around your back door and left some empty plastic bags to make it look like drug activity. Jesus, Mike muttered. She's really lost it. The good news is that your security cameras captured everything. The bad news is that she's still out there, and she's clearly escalating her behavior. Officer Rodriguez approached with his notepad. We found her car abandoned about 2 miles from here, in the parking lot of that 24-hour diner on Route 9. But we're canvassing the area. Detective Morrison pulled Mike aside. Mr. Harrison, I need you to understand how serious this situation has become. Karen Delmont is no longer just a problem. Neighbor, she's someone who's committed multiple crimes and is actively trying to frame you for drug possession. That's a federal offense. What do I do? You keep documenting everything. You don't go anywhere alone for a while, and you call us immediately if you see or hear from her again. Mike nodded, but his mind was racing. Detective, can I ask you something? In your experience, when someone does something this extreme, what are they usually trying to accomplish? Usually one of 2 things. Either they're trying to discredit you so that your previous testimony against them becomes unreliable, or they're trying to create a situation where you'll be arrested and unable to testify against them. And if neither of those things work. At 7 a.m., Mike was sitting in his kitchen with a cup of coffee, trying to process the night's events, when his phone rang. The caller ID showed Karen's name, Detective Morrison. Karen's calling me? Answer it, but put it on speaker. We're recording. Mike accepted the call. Hello, Karen. Mike, thank God you answered. I need your help. Karen's voice sounded different, panicked, desperate. Mike could hear traffic in the background. Where are you, Karen? I can't tell you that. But I need you to know that I never meant for things to go this far. What happened last night, ... that wasn't me. I mean, it was me, but I wasn't thinking clearly. You tried to frame me for drug possession. I know how it looks, but you have to understand, I was desperate. When that detective called yesterday, I panicked. I thought if I could just ... if there was some way to make you look unreliable, then maybe they'd drop the charges against me. Mike looked at Detective Morrison, who nodded for him to keep talking. Karen, you need to turn yourself in. This has gone way beyond a neighborhood dispute. I can't go to jail, Mike. I have responsibilities. My mother depends on me. She's in assisted living, and I'm her only family. If I go to prison, who's going to take care of her? You should have thought about that before you started creating fake legal documents and filing false police reports. I never meant for it to escalate like this. All I wanted was for you to be considerate about the pool. If you had just asked around, talked to the neighbors, maybe we could have worked something out. Mike felt his anger returning. Karen, there was nothing to work out. It was my pool on my property, and I had every right to remove it. But you didn't care about the impact on anyone else. What impact? Name one person who was actually negatively affected by me removing that pool. Karen was quiet for a long moment. It's not about specific impacts. It's about the principle. It's about being part of a community instead of just doing whatever you want. The community you're talking about doesn't exist. Karen, you invented it in your head. And then you tried to enforce imaginary rules with fake legal documents. I've lived in this neighborhood for 15 years, and in 15 years, have you ever organized a community meeting, started a neighborhood watch, planned a block party, done anything to actually build the community you claim to care about? Another long silence. Karen, Mike said, I organized a petition about the streetlights 3 years ago. What happened with that? Not many people signed it. Mike rubbed his forehead. Karen, listen to me. You've committed serious crimes. You tried to frame me for drug possession. You need to turn yourself in and get a lawyer. You won't survive running from the police either. Where are you going to go? How long do you think you can hide? I don't know, maybe my cousin in Florida. Or I have some money saved up. Maybe I can figure something out. Detective Morrison was writing notes and showing them to Mike. The note read, keep her talking. We're tracing the call. Karen, running away is only going to make things worse. They'll find you eventually, and when they do, you'll be facing additional charges. For fleeing, I know that. Karen's voice cracked, but I don't have any good options left. This is all your fault, Mike. If you had just been reasonable about the pool, none of this would have happened. If I had just let you intimidate me with fake legal documents, you mean I was trying to protect the neighborhood. You were trying to control me, Karen, and when that didn't work, you escalated to criminal behavior. I never meant for it to go this far, Karen repeated, but her voice was getting harder, more bitter. I just wanted some respect, some consideration. I've been the one looking out for this neighborhood for years, and nobody appreciates it. Looking out for it? How? I report code violations. I keep track of who's not maintaining their property. I make sure people know about the noise ordinances and the parking restrictions. You mean you spy on your neighbors and file complaints about them? I maintain standards. Mike heard a car door slam in the background of Karen's call, followed by the sound of an engine starting. Karen, where are you going? I don't know. Somewhere I can think. Somewhere I can figure out how to fix this mess. The only way to fix it is to turn yourself in. No, there has to be another way. There's always another way, if you're smart enough to find it. The line went dead. Detective Morrison immediately got on her radio. We need to check all the traffic cameras on Route 9 and the surrounding area. She's mobile and potentially heading out of state. Mike stared at his phone. She's not going to give up, is she? People who've gone this far rarely do, Morrison replied. But we'll find her, and when we do, she'll be facing a lot more than just the original charges. What do you mean? Attempted evidence tampering? Fleeing to avoid prosecution? Possibly. Interstate flight to avoid prosecution if she crosses state. Mike spent 3 days at his brother's house, watching the news coverage of Karen's manhunt from the safety of Dan's living room. The story had exploded across local media. Suburban neighbor becomes fugitive after pool dispute escalates to frame-up. Attempts. The irony wasn't lost on him that Karen's efforts to avoid attention had made her the most notorious person in the county. Channel 7, is calling it Poolgate, Don said, flipping through the morning news. They've got reporters camped out in front of both your houses. Mike rubbed his eyes. He'd barely slept since Karen's phone call, jumping at every unexpected sound, any word from Detective Morrison. She called while you were in the shower. They found Karen's car abandoned at a rest stop near the Pennsylvania border, but no sign of her. They think she might have switched vehicles. Mike's phone buzzed with another text from the unknown number. Enjoying your 15 minutes of fame? You have no idea what's coming. He immediately forwarded it to Detective Morrison, who called back within minutes. Mr. Harrison, we've traced. The security footage shows a woman matching Karen's description, but she was wearing a hat and sunglasses. So she planned this. It looks that way she's been preparing for this scenario longer than we initially thought. We found evidence in her house that she's been monitoring your social media accounts, taking photos of your property, and researching your work schedule for weeks. Mike felt his blood run cold. She's been stalking me extensively. We found a notebook with detailed logs of your daily routine, including when you leave for work, when you come home, what time you take out your trash. Even when you get grocery deliveries. Jesus Christ, there's more. We found evidence that she's been researching how to make false allegations look credible. She had printouts about drug planting techniques, how to manipulate physical evidence, and legal strategies for discrediting witnesses. Mike sank into Dan's couch. This wasn't just about the pool, was it? No. Based on what we've found, Karen Dalemont appears to have some form of obsessive personality disorder. The pool was just the trigger that set off a pattern of behavior that was probably already there. What do you mean? We've been interviewing other people in the neighborhood. Turns out Karen has had disputes with multiple neighbors over the years. The Johnsons, who owned your house before you, actually filed a restraining order against her in 2019. For what? She was harassing them about their pool parties, taking photos of their guests' license plates, and filing noise complaints almost weekly. When they tried to talk to her about it, she escalated to following Mrs. Johnson to the grocery store and confronting her in public. Mike felt sick. The Johnsons moved out of state specifically to get away from her. They probably didn't want to think about it anymore, let alone get involved in warning new neighbors. So, I walked into a situation that was already primed to explode. Exactly, and now Karen has convinced herself that you're the source of all her problems. In her mind, if she can just get rid of you, everything will go back to normal. Mike's phone rang. The caller ID showed his home number. She's in my house, Mike said, his voice barely above a whisper. Detective Morrison's voice became sharp and urgent. Don't answer it. We're sending units to your address now. Mike stared at the ringing phone, his hands shaking. On the fourth ring, the call went to voicemail. A few seconds later, his phone chimed with a voicemail notification. Play it on speaker, Detective Morrison instructed. Mike hit play. And Karen's voice filled the room, but it sounded different, now calmer, more controlled, almost conversational. Hi, Mike. I'm in your kitchen right now, and I have to say, you've done a nice job with the renovations. I particularly like the new backsplash, very tasteful. I'm calling because I think it's time we had a proper conversation about how to resolve our situation. I know you're not at home. I've been watching your brother's house, and I saw you there yesterday. Don't worry, I'm not going to damage anything. I just want to talk, but I need you to come home, Mike. We need to settle this like adults, face to face. I'll be waiting. The message ended, and Mike realized he was holding his breath. She's been watching Dan's house, Mike said. She knows I'm here. We have units en route to both locations, Detective Morrison said. Don't leave your brother's house under any circumstances. 5 minutes later, Mike's phone rang again. This time, the caller ID showed Dan's name, but Dan was sitting right next to him. She has your brother's phone, Detective Morrison said grimly. Mike answered on speaker. Much better, Karen said. Now we can have a proper conversation. Mike, I want you to know that I'm not angry with you anymore. I've had time to think about this situation, and I realize we both made mistakes. You were inconsiderate about the pool, and I may have overreacted. But we're both reasonable people, and reasonable people can find solutions to their problems. Karen, where are you? I'm somewhere safe. Somewhere we can talk without interruption. I've been thinking about what you said about community, about being a good neighbor. You were right about some things. Maybe I have been too focused on maintaining standards instead of building relationships. Mike looked at Detective Morrison, who was frantically writing notes and making hand signals. I'm glad you're thinking about it, Karen, but you need to turn yourself in. The police will work with you if you cooperate. The police want to put me in jail, Mike. They don't want to. Help me. But you could help me. You could tell them that this was all a misunderstanding, that we've worked things out. I can't do that, Karen. You committed crimes. You tried to frame me. I was desperate. I made a mistake, but I'm trying to make it right. Isn't that what neighbors do? They help each other when they make mistakes. Detective Morrison held up. Where do you want to meet, Karen? Somewhere neutral. Somewhere we can talk privately. I was thinking the old Millbrook Elementary School. It's been abandoned for years, so we won't be disturbed. Mike knew the placid defunct school building about 10 miles outside town, surrounded by woods and far from any residential areas. Karen, I'm not going to meet you at an abandoned building. That's not safe for either of us. It's perfectly safe. I just want to talk, Mike. I want to explain why I did what I did, and I want to hear your side of things. Then we can figure out how to move forward. We can move forward by you turning yourself in. Karen's voice suddenly became harder. You're not listening, Mike. I'm trying to be reasonable here, but you're not giving me any options. I can't go to jail. I won't survive it. So we need to find another solution. What kind of solution? I've been thinking about that. What if you moved away, sold your house, and found somewhere else to live? Then I could go back to normal, and you could start fresh somewhere where you don't have to worry about neighborhood considerations. Mike felt his anger flaring. It's not about the pool anymore, Mike. It's about finding a solution that works for everyone. The solution is for you to face the consequences of your actions and get the help you need. I don't need help. Karen's voice rose sharply. I need people to stop treating me like I'm crazy when I'm the only one who cares about maintaining civilized standards in this community. I've spent 15 years trying to keep this neighborhood from turning into a trashy, anything-goes area where people can do whatever they want without considering their neighbors. I've filed complaints, I've attended city council meetings, I've tried to organize community standards committees. And do you know what I get for it? I get called crazy. I get ignored. I get treated like I'm some kind of busybody who should mind her own business. Mike could hear her breathing heavily through the phone. But when someone moves in and starts tearing things down without asking anyone, suddenly I'm the bad guy for trying to maintain some sense of order. I'm done trying to work within a system that doesn't want to work. Karen, what are you saying? I'm saying that if you won't meet me to discuss this reasonably, then I'll have to take more direct action. I know where you work. I know your daily routine. I know where your brother lives. I know where your parents live in Florida. I know a lot of things, Mike. Detective Morrison was frantically gesturing, but Mike couldn't focus on her signals. All he could think about was that Karen had just threatened his entire family. Are you threatening my family, Karen? I'm explaining the situation. You've made this personal by refusing to work with me. So now it's personal. The line went dead. Detective Morrison immediately got on her radio. All units, we have a credible threat against a protected witness and his family. I need immediate protection details from Mike Harrison's parents in Sarasota, Florida, and his brother Dan Harrison at this address. Mike felt the walls closing in around him. She's not going to stop, is she? Not until we catch her. But we